Rana Foroohar, our FT columnist, has spent the last few years writing about the dangers of big finance and Wall Street firms, but now her recent columns have been about the dangers of big tech. Rana, why are you so concerned about what the big tech companies are doing right now?
Well, I try and always look, where's the money, where's the power? What is that middle part of the hourglass? Who can control that? And really at this point it's the tech firms. And it's interesting because towards the end of my book on finance I was thinking, gosh, maybe I should have focused on tech, because increasingly that's where really the monopoly power in the country is. If you think about the largest tech firms, Google, Amazon, Facebook, they are controlling a significant chunk of corporate profits. They've got the majority of corporate cash in reserve. Google is the #1 lobbyist in Washington right now. There's just a tremendous amount of political and economic power being controlled by these firms.
But I mean, some people would say, why does that matter? I mean, are they actually abusing their power? Do you see signs of that?
I do see signs of it, and I would start with what we've seen recently, some of the scandals. For example, the New America Foundation, Google was accused of having someone that was working there that didn't agree with the party line on monopoly power, letting them go. This is a Google-funded, Eric Schmidt-funded institution, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. In one of the columns I wrote about how Google has its formal lobbying, which is massive, of course, but then it has its informal tentacles of power, and it gives money, and all the big tech firms do really, to any number of nonprofits. The American Library Association, the various ethnic caucuses, things that you would think have nothing to do with big tech, and then suddenly you wonder, well, maybe why are they towing the party line? It's because they've been funded by these organizations.
So basically, Google is using its money and philanthropy to silence critics.
Absolutely. I've actually spoken to academics who've said that it's very difficult if you are not friendly to their position to get, certainly to get funding from those organizations, and that they actively support academics that do agree with their position and then put them forward in conferences and things. So there's a lot of silent lobbying going on here.
Now, your most recent column was looking at the issue of patents or patents, which of course in the past Silicon Valley has been a great champion of. What makes you concerned about what big tech are doing there right now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you think about who's innovating in the American economy, you could put it broadly into two baskets: life sciences, so big pharma, biotech, and technology, software. Now, those are two very, very different business models. So if you think about how life sciences and pharma works, they're really dependent on investing a lot of money and placing one or two big bets. They have a couple of patents. You can argue how long they should last, how much they should charge for drugs, but they place their bets, and that patent is really the quid pro quo for how they're going to be rewarded. Software has an entirely different model. The big tech companies in particular have some of their own IP to protect, sure, but increasingly they're monetizing everybody else's IP. That's one of the reasons that they like the open source movement. And in fact, when suppliers come to them and say, we'd like you to use our patented technology or buy it, they often say, well, we'd like you to make it open source first. Then they can look at it, build it, maybe internally. It's not an even playing field, and so I'm hearing from a lot of small business people in the supply chain and software that says, hey, we're getting bilked because of the changes in the patent system, which, by the way, they pushed and lobbied for.
Of course, at the moment, the only people who are standing up to this, of course, are the European regulators.
Indeed. And it's interesting. I mean, I hear that the CEOs of big tech fly over every so often to Brussels and try and kind of intimidate them and say, well, you didn't have a homegrown Google or Apple. And so I hope that we do see more pressure. Fines are one thing, but the truth is these companies have more money than God, and they can afford to pay these fines. I think we're really going to have to start looking in a regulatory way, in a legislative way, about antitrust issues. Should some of these companies be broken up? Should some of the loopholes that they get through, which I've already written columns on as well, about liabilities, should they be closed? So for example, if the FT were running ads from known criminals, we would be liable for that. If you're a platform company, you can say, I'm the town square, that's not my problem, I'm not responsible for what's being done. But these companies know what's being done, and they are increasingly monetizing what's being done on their sites. And so I think it's really something that a lot of politicians are starting to look carefully at.
Well, it's also something that's going to give you a lot more columns. So
Absolutely.
Keep writing the columns and keep reading.